You've probably never thought about it. Somewhere right now, a woman is wearing a bra, and she thinks it's a modern invention. Elastic, underwire, cotton blends, something her great-grandmother might not have even had. She's wrong, and the truth is stranger, older, and honestly more clever than anything on a department store shelf. Because 4,000 years ago, on an island in the Mediterranean, women were already solving this exact problem, not with elastic, with linen, wool, and a knot tied behind the back. Let's go to Crete. Around 2000 to 1500 BCE, the Minoan civilization was doing something. European fashion wouldn't attempt again for over 3,000 years, tailoring clothing to fit the actual shape of the female body. Minoan frescoes and figurines, the famous snake goddess statuettes among them, show women wearing a fitted band across the chest, sometimes called an apodesmos. It wraps and supports, cinched at a narrow waist underneath. Here's where I have to be honest with you, because guessing at ancient intent is exactly the kind of mistake that makes history content untrustworthy. Archaeologists don't actually agree on why Minoan women wore this. Was it purely functional? Support for daily work, farming, climbing these island hillsides? Was it about status, showing off imported dyed wool? Or was it tied to religious and ceremonial dress, since many of these figures appear in ritual contexts? The honest answer is, we don't know for certain. All three theories have serious backing, and no single one has won. What we do know is this. The idea of a fitted, chest-supporting garment is not a 20th century idea. It's at least 4,000 years old. Now travel forward almost 1,500 years to classical Greece. Here the evidence gets less speculative, because for the first time we have women's own words, or at least words written about them. In Aristophanes' comedy Lysistrata, a woman teases her husband by mentioning she's removing her strophion. It's a band, usually linen or soft leather, wrapped around the ribcage and chest. And even earlier than that, in Homer's Iliad, the goddess Aphrodite is described loosening an embroidered girdle from her breast, before lending it to another goddess. Scholars read this as a decorated breastband, evidence that the concept was familiar enough to Greek audiences that Homer didn't need to explain it. Classical archaeologist Mireille Lee, who has published extensively on Greek dress, makes an important point here. These bands were probably worn under clothing, and likely the exception rather than the daily rule for most women. Why? Because a tightly wrapped band interferes with something essential: breastfeeding. In a world without formula, without alternatives, most women spent years of their lives nursing. A garment that worked against that wouldn't survive as everyday wear, so the strophion likely shows up for specific moments: athletic activity, dance, situations where support mattered more than access. Not a daily uniform, a tool used when needed. Rome takes this further and gives us our best physical evidence yet: a mosaic. At the Villa Romana del Casale in Sicily, dated to the 4th century CE, there's a mosaic nicknamed the Bikini Girls. Women are shown exercising, competing in what looks like ancient athletic games, wearing a two-piece garment, a strophium-style chest band paired with bottoms strikingly similar to a modern bikini. Roman women had several names for these garments: strophium, fascia, mamilla. And classicist Jan Radicke notes something crucial. We don't have enough physical evidence to know exactly what these looked like in daily life, or whether their purpose was support, modesty, status, or some mix of all three. Some ancient sources claim Roman beauty standards favoured a smaller bust, and that these bands were used to compress rather than lift. Other sources push back on how reliable that claim really is. I'm not going to pretend certainty where historians themselves don't have it. What's solid? The function, wrapping, binding, supporting the chest during activity, existed, was named, and was documented in more than one form across more than one century. Now here's the myth correction moment, because it's easy to assume every ancient culture had a version of this. Egypt mostly didn't. Egyptian women lived in a hot, dry climate, and clothing prioritized airflow over structure. The evidence points to sheer linen tunics and wraps, often leaving the chest visible or minimally covered, without a dedicated support garment. If you've read claims online insisting Egypt had its own ancient bra, treat that carefully. The archaeological record here is thin. Sometimes the honest answer to how did they solve this is, for this particular culture, at this particular time, they largely didn't need to, or chose not to. And here's the twist that surprises almost everyone, including me, the first time I read about it. In 2008, archaeologists working in Lengberg Castle, Austria, found linen garments stuffed into a vault, and 2 of them had cups, actual shaped, sewn cups, structurally similar to a modern bra. They're dated to the 15th century. I need to be precise here, because precision is the whole point of this channel. This is medieval, not ancient. It sits over 1,000 years after Rome, but it matters for the story, because for decades clothing historians assumed cup-shaped support was a 19th or 20th century invention. Lengberg proved that wrong by 5 centuries. The real timeline isn't a straight line from no support to modern bra. It's older ideas, forgotten, then rediscovered. So when you put it all together, a Minoan band 4,000 years ago, a Greek strophion in Homer's poetry, a Roman mosaic of women mid-exercise, and cups sewn in Austria 6 centuries before your grandmother was born. The story isn't that ancient women lacked solutions. It's that we've been telling ourselves the wrong timeline. Every generation likes to believe it invented comfort, invented practicality, invented the idea of designing something just for how a body actually works. But the truth is quieter than that. Someone, thousands of years before you, already had the same problem and already found their own answer to this with wool, with linen, with a knot instead of a clasp. History doesn't move in a straight line from primitive to modern. It loops, it forgets, it rediscovers. So, tell me, which ancient solution surprised you most? The Minoan band, the Roman mosaic, or the medieval cups nobody expected? Drop it in the comments.